2 years. That's how long Aaliyah Miller had been waiting for a man the world called a monster. 2 years of visiting a secured medical facility every week, watching Park Ji-sung rebuild himself behind reinforced glass while prosecutors built their case brick by legal brick. 2 years of her mother's phone calls asking when she'd come home, of her nursing license collecting dust, of living in a mansion that felt more like a mausoleum with its owner gone. But today was different. Today, the jury would deliver their verdict. Aaliyah stood outside the Seoul criminal court, her black dress conservative and professional, her braids pulled back tight. The media swarmed like locusts, cameras, microphones, reporters shouting questions in Korean and English. She kept her head down, following Taewon through the crowd. He'd been her shadow for 2 years, keeping her safe while his boss fought for freedom. "Miss Miller, is it true you're engaged to Park Ji-sung? Did you know about his crimes? Are you here out of love or obligation?" She didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because the truth was complicated, and complications didn't fit into sound bites. Inside the courtroom, she found her seat, third row, left side, same spot she'd occupied for 18 months of trial proceedings. The room smelled of old wood and tension. Ji-sung's legal team sat at the defense table, 3 of Korea's most expensive lawyers in perfectly tailored suits. Then they brought him in. Ji-sung walked, flanked by guards. His gait was careful, measured, but independent. No walker, no wheelchair. Just a man who'd spent 2 years in physical therapy while fighting for his life in court. Their eyes met across the courtroom. He gave her the smallest nod, and she felt her heart crack and mend simultaneously. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The weight of the moment pressed down like physical force. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." This was it. Freedom or decades in prison. A future together, or a future of visiting rooms and monitored phone calls until they were both old and broken. Aaliyah gripped the seat in front of her, her knuckles going pale. The jury foreperson stood, holding a single sheet of paper that contained the answer to everything. Before the story continues, let me say this: if any of these stories comfort you, entertain you, or make you feel understood, please subscribe. It's free, but it means everything to this channel. Now, let's continue. The jury foreperson was a woman in her 50s, wearing glasses that reflected the courtroom lights. She cleared her throat, and the sound echoed like a gunshot in the silence. "On the count of international smuggling, we find the defendant not guilty." Aaliyah's breath caught, one down. "On the count of racketeering, we find the defendant not guilty." The prosecutors shifted uncomfortably. Ji-sung remained perfectly still. "On the count of conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, we find the defendant not guilty." The charges continued. Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. 12 counts, and the jury dismissed each one with the same 2 words. The prosecution's case, built on testimony from Dae-jung and other compromised sources, had crumbled under the scrutiny of Ji-sung's legal team. But then the foreperson paused, looked at the final charge. "On the count of operating an unlicensed pharmaceutical distribution network, we find the defendant guilty." The courtroom erupted. Reporters scrambled. The prosecutors looked simultaneously vindicated and disappointed. One guilty verdict after expecting 12. The defense team conferred urgently. Aaliyah's world narrowed to Ji-sung's face. He showed no reaction, no relief for the 11 acquittals, no fear for the single conviction. Just that calculated stillness he'd perfected over 2 years of legal warfare. The judge banged his gavel. "Order. This court will reconvene in 2 weeks for sentencing on the guilty verdict. Until then, the defendant will remain in supervised medical custody." He looked at Ji-sung directly. "Mr. Park, you've been acquitted of the most serious charges against you. The remaining conviction carries a maximum sentence of 5 years. However, given your medical circumstances and cooperation during trial, this court is inclined toward leniency. Use these 2 weeks wisely." The guards approached Ji-sung. Before they could escort him out, he looked at Aaliyah again. This time, he mouthed 2 words. "Wait for me." She nodded, as if there'd ever been any other option. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy intensified. Taewon muscled through the crowd, protecting Aaliyah from the worst of it. Questions flew like arrows. "Miss Miller, how do you feel about the verdict? Will you stand by him if he's sentenced to prison? Do you believe he's innocent?" Finally, Aaliyah stopped, turned to face the cameras. Taewon looked alarmed, but she held up a hand. "I believe," she said clearly, precisely, "that the jury heard all the evidence and made their decision. I respect that decision. And yes, I will be here, regardless of the sentencing outcome. That's what loyalty means. Even if he goes to prison for 5 years? Even then. Why? What makes Park Ji-sung worth such devotion? Aaliyah looked directly into the nearest camera. Because he's a human being who deserves someone in his corner. Because justice is complicated, and sometimes the law and morality don't align perfectly. And because I made a promise. I keep my promises. She walked away before they could ask more, but the clip would be on every news station within the hour. Tywin guided her to the waiting car. That was brave, he said once they were safely inside. Or stupid. Probably both. Aaliyah leaned back against the seat, exhaustion crashing over her. Take me to see him, please. I know it's not visiting hours, but already arranged. Mr. Park requested you be allowed a private meeting. 30 minutes, supervised but private. The medical facility where Ji-sung was held looked more like a luxury hospital than a detention center. His room on the secured wing was comfortable, better than most regular patients received, but still a cell by any other name. He was standing by the window when she entered, looking out at Seoul's skyline. He turned when the door closed, and for a moment, they just stared at each other. Then Aaliyah crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him. He held her tightly, his face buried in her braids. You came. Of course I came. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought, he pulled back to look at her. I thought maybe you'd finally realize this is insane, that waiting for me is insane, that you deserve better than a convicted criminal. Stop telling me what I deserve. I decide that. She cupped his face. 11 not guilty verdicts, Ji-sung. That's incredible. 1 guilty verdict. That's all that matters now. The judge said he's inclined toward leniency. That could mean probation or time served or 5 years in actual prison, not a medical facility. He moved away, resuming his position by the window. The prosecutors will push for maximum sentencing. They lost too much face today to let me walk away with a slap on the wrist. Aaliyah studied him. He'd changed in 2 years, leaner, harder, but also more settled in himself. The man who'd been ashamed of his wheelchair was gone. This version of Ji-sung had accepted his limitations and worked within them. The physical therapy had restored enough function that he could walk short distances, stand for brief periods. Not the same as before, but enough. More than enough. What do you want? She asked. If sentencing goes badly, if you're sent to prison for years, what do you want me to do? I want you to live your life. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give. He turned to face her. Aaliyah, you've put your entire life on hold for 2 years. Your nursing career, your family, your future. All of it frozen while you wait for me. If I'm sentenced to more time, I can't ask you to keep waiting. It's not fair. Life's not fair. We've established that. She moved closer. What I want to know is, do you still want me? After everything? After 2 years apart? After all the testimony you heard about my life before you? After seeing how the media portrays me as either a fool or a gold digger? Do you still want this? Ji-sung's laugh was bitter. Want you? Aaliyah, you're all I've thought about for 2 years. Every physical therapy session, I pushed harder because I wanted to be stronger for you. Every legal strategy meeting, I fought harder because I wanted to build a future with you. Every night alone in this room, He stopped himself. Yes, I still want you. More than I've ever wanted anything. Then stop trying to push me away from my own good. Trust me to make my own choices. Even if your choice is a mistake, even then. He crossed the space between them in 4 careful steps. His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. I'm going to marry you, he said quietly. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but eventually, when I'm free and clear, when I can offer you something more than legal complications, I'm going to marry you, if you'll have me. Is that a proposal? No, that's a promise. The proposal comes later when I can do it properly. Aaliyah smiled despite everything. You're very presumptuous. I'm very certain. He kissed her then, soft and deep and filled with 2 years of forced distance. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, a guard knocked on the door. Time's up. They pulled apart reluctantly. Ji-sung kept hold of her hand until the last possible second. 2 weeks, he said. Then we'll know. 2 weeks, she agreed. I'll be there. As she left, she heard him call after her. Aaliyah, she turned. Thank you. For everything. For staying when anyone rational would have run. Who says I'm rational? His smile was the last thing she saw before the door closed. The next 2 weeks existed in a strange limbo. Aaliyah spent her days at Ji-sung's mansion, her home now, though it never quite felt like hers without him in it. Mrs. Bayek had stayed on, keeping the house running with quiet efficiency. Taewon remained as head of security, though what they were securing was unclear with Ji-sung detained. The organization had fractured during the trial. Some of Ji-sung's allies had maintained loyalty, but others had moved on, carved out their own territories or been absorbed into rival groups. Whatever power structure Ji-sung had commanded before the shooting was gone now. If he was released, he'd be starting over. If he was released. Aaliyah tried not to think about the alternative, tried to focus on the concrete and immediate. She'd started volunteering at a free clinic in Itaewon, working 3 days a week. It felt good to use her nursing skills again, to help people who couldn't afford regular medical care. It reminded her why Ji-sung's pharmaceutical smuggling had felt righteous despite being illegal. On day 9 of the 2-week wait, Aaliyah received a visitor. She was in the garden, attempting to revive the plants that had been neglected during Ji-sung's absence, when Mrs. Bayek appeared with a guest. The woman was in her 60s, elegantly dressed with the kind of beauty that came from good genes and better cosmetic work. She carried herself with authority that made Aaliyah stand automatically. "Miss Miller," the woman said in perfect English, "I am Park Yoon-hee, Ji-sung's mother." Aaliyah's heart stuttered. Ji-sung never spoke about his mother. In 2 years, she'd never met any of his family. She'd assumed they were either dead or estranged. "Mrs. Park, please sit." Aaliyah gestured to the garden bench. Yoon-hee sat with perfect posture, her hands folded in her lap. She studied Aaliyah with dark eyes that looked exactly like Ji-sung's. "You are not what I expected," Yoon-hee said finally. "I rarely am." Aaliyah sat beside her, maintaining careful distance. "Does Ji-sung know you're here?" "No. I came without his knowledge because I needed to see for myself the woman who has captured my son's devotion so completely." She tilted her head. "He speaks of you often. In our phone calls, you are the only topic that brings warmth to his voice." "You've been in contact with him?" "Of course. He is my son. The trial, the imprisonment, none of that changes blood." She paused. "Though I admit, his life choices have disappointed me over the years." "The criminal enterprise, you mean? The violence, the unnecessary danger, the refusal to walk away when he still could." Yoon-hee's voice held old grief. After his father died, Ji-sung felt he needed to prove something, to establish himself, to build power, to never be vulnerable again. He succeeded, but at great cost. Aaliyah absorbed this information. Ji-sung had never mentioned his father's death, another secret kept, another piece of his past locked away. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because the sentencing is in 5 days, and I want you to understand what you're committing to." Yoon-hee turned to face her fully. "If Ji-sung receives prison time, his remaining organization will collapse completely. His allies will abandon him. His assets will be seized or stolen. Everything he built will disappear. And you will be left with a man who has nothing except you." "I know. Do you? Do you truly understand what it means to love a man with no power, no money, no influence? A convicted criminal with limited mobility and a target on his back from old enemies?" "Yes," Aaliyah said firmly. "I understand all of that, and I'm staying anyway." Yoon-hee studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. "Good, because my son needs someone strong enough to stand beside him when everything falls apart. I was not that person for his father. I let social pressure and fear of scandal drive me away. I have regretted it every day since." "You left him?" "When the prosecutors first investigated my husband's business dealings, I filed for divorce, chose my reputation over my marriage. My husband died of a heart attack 6 months later, and Ji-sung was alone at 19 years old." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "I abandoned him when he needed me most. I will not make that mistake twice. Which is why I'm telling you, if you truly love my son, you stay. No matter what happens at sentencing, you stay." The fierce protectiveness in her voice was startling. Aaliyah reached out, taking the older woman's hand. "I'm staying," she promised. "I've made that commitment, and I keep my word." Yoon-hee squeezed her hand. "Then you have my blessing and my apology." "For what?" "For taking so long to meet you, for letting fear keep me away, for not being the mother Ji-sung deserved." She stood, composing herself. "I will be at the sentencing, sitting beside you if you'll permit it." "I'd like that." After Yoon-hee left, Aaliyah sat in the garden for a long time, processing. Ji-sung's mother had abandoned him during his father's scandal. His fiancée had left after his paralysis. No wonder he'd tested Aaliyah so thoroughly. No wonder he kept expecting her to leave. Everyone in his life had taught him that love was conditional, that people stayed only when things were good. Aaliyah intended to teach him differently. The night before sentencing, Aaliyah couldn't sleep. She paced her room, Ji-sung's room technically, though she'd been sleeping there for months, surrounded by his things, trying to keep his space alive and waiting. At 3 a.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number, but she answered anyway. "Aaliyah." Ji-sung's voice low and warm despite the hour. "How are you calling me?" I thought. "I have friends who still owe favors. One of the guards let me use his personal phone. I have 5 minutes before he needs it back." There was rustling, like he was moving somewhere more private. I couldn't sleep, kept thinking about tomorrow. "Me too." "Are you scared?" "Terrified," she admitted, "but not of the sentencing. I'm scared of how you'll react if it goes badly. Scared you'll try to push me away again to protect me. I won't, he said it with certainty. I've learned my lesson about pushing you away. You're too stubborn to be pushed anyway. Damn right, he laughed, and the sound made her chest ache. I need to tell you something, in case tomorrow goes wrong, in case I don't get another chance to say it properly. Ji-sung, let me finish. These past 2 years, knowing you were waiting, knowing you chose me despite everything, it saved me, Aaliyah, not from prison or prosecution, from myself, from the darkness that would have consumed me if I'd been alone. You gave me a reason to fight, to heal, to believe in a future worth surviving for. His voice roughened. Whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know, loving you has been the best decision I ever made, even if I made it from a hospital bed while running from a sexual predator. Aaliyah laughed through tears. That's quite an origin story. We'll tell our grandchildren a sanitized version, assuming we survive to have grandchildren. We will. I'm certain of it. He paused. I have to go. The guard is giving me the signal. But Aaliyah, yes? Wear something blue tomorrow. It's my favorite color on you. You've never told me that. I'm telling you now. Blue. Like that dress you wore the first time I took you to dinner, back when we were pretending we weren't falling in love. We were terrible at pretending. The worst. His voice softened. I love you. I love you too. See you tomorrow. The line went dead. Aaliyah held the phone for a long time, staring at the screen. Then she went to her closet and found the blue dress. Navy, fitted, professional. The one she'd worn to that dinner 18 months into her employment when they'd stopped being able to deny what was happening between them. She hung it up for morning. Then she finally slept. The courtroom was packed. Ji-sung's supporters, what remained of them, filled the left side. Victims of pharmaceutical price gouging, people who'd received his smuggled medications, filled the right. The prosecution sat, stone-faced, ready to argue for maximum sentencing. The defense looked cautiously optimistic. Aaliyah sat in her usual seat, third row left, wearing the blue dress. Yoon-hee sat beside her, elegant in black and silver. Taiwan stood in the back, arms crossed, watching everything. They brought Ji-sung in. He'd dressed carefully for this, a dark suit that fit his leaner frame, his hair styled back, his walk steady and controlled. He spotted Aaliyah immediately, and something in his expression softened. Then he saw his mother. The surprise that flickered across his face was almost comical. Yoon-hee raised her hand in a small wave. He blinked, then nodded, clearly trying to process his mother's presence. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The weight of the moment settled like snow. Cold, heavy, inevitable. Park Ji-sung, you've been found guilty of operating an unlicensed pharmaceutical distribution network. Before I pass sentence, does the defendant wish to make a statement? Ji-sung's lead attorney stood. Your Honor, my client does wish to address the court. Ji-sung stood, gripping the table for balance. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the courtroom. Your Honor, members of the court, I stand before you guilty of the crime as charged. I did operate an unlicensed pharmaceutical network. I did smuggle medications across international borders. I did violate numerous laws in multiple jurisdictions. He paused. I did these things knowingly, deliberately, and without remorse at the time. The prosecutors looked pleased. The defense attorney looked alarmed. But Ji-sung continued. However, I want this court to understand why. 3 years ago, I watched a child die in a hospital waiting room because her parents couldn't afford the $500 EpiPen that would have saved her life. That medication costs $30 to manufacture. The markup is pure profit. I watched that child die, and I decided I wouldn't watch another. He shifted his weight, his legs trembling slightly from standing so long. So yes, I smuggled insulin from Canada, where it costs $30 instead of $300. I imported cancer medications from India, where they're sold at cost instead of marked up 3,000%. I distributed antibiotics that save lives but are priced beyond the reach of those who need them most. I broke the law, but I saved lives, hundreds of lives, based on the testimony you've heard. The judge's expression was unreadable. The courtroom was silent. I know the law doesn't care about my intentions. I know that I was trying to help isn't a legal defense, but I want this court to understand. I'm not sorry for what I did. I'm only sorry I got caught before I could help more people. He looked at Aaliyah then, just for a moment. I'm also sorry for the pain my actions have caused the people who love me. They didn't deserve to be dragged through this process. They deserved better than a criminal, no matter how well-intentioned. He sat down, breathing hard from the exertion. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then, Mr. Park, your statement is noted. Does the prosecution wish to make a sentencing recommendation? The lead prosecutor stood, his expression hard. Your Honor, The prosecution recommends the maximum sentence of 5 years imprisonment. The defendant has shown no remorse, continues to justify his criminal behavior, and poses a continued threat to legal pharmaceutical distribution. His wealth and connections make him a flight risk. We request immediate incarceration in a standard correctional facility. Aaliyah's hands clenched in her lap. 5 years. Standard facility, not medical custody. They wanted him in actual prison, where his mobility issues would make him vulnerable. Does the defense wish to respond? The defense attorney stood. Your Honor, we request leniency based on several factors. First, Mr. Park's medical needs require specialized care not available in standard facilities. Second, he has no prior criminal record. Third, the crime was non-violent and motivated by humanitarian concerns, however misguided. Fourth, he has been a model detainee during 2 years of pretrial custody. We request probation with community service, specifically working with legitimate pharmaceutical access programs. The judge nodded. I will take a 30-minute recess to consider sentencing. Court is adjourned. The gavel banged. Those 30 minutes felt like 30 hours. Aaliyah sat frozen, Yoonhee's hand gripping hers tightly. They didn't speak, couldn't speak, just waited while Ji-sung's future was decided in chambers. When the judge returned, the courtroom collectively held its breath. Park Ji-sung, please rise. Ji-sung stood, his attorney beside him. This court has considered all the factors presented, the severity of the crime, the defendant's motivations, his medical circumstances, and his conduct during the trial process. I have also considered the testimony from individuals whose lives were saved by access to affordable medication through the defendant's network. The judge paused, and Aaliyah's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The law exists for a reason. Pharmaceutical regulation protects public health, ensures drug safety, and maintains order in medical distribution. The defendant's actions, however well-intentioned, undermined these systems and created risks that could have resulted in harm. Here it comes, Aaliyah thought. 5 years. They're going to lock him away. However, the judge continued, this court also recognizes that the defendant exposed significant flaws in our current pharmaceutical access system. His criminal enterprise, while illegal, highlighted the desperate measures people take when legal systems fail them. Someone in the gallery gasped. The prosecutor's face reddened. Therefore, I am sentencing Park Ji-sung to 5 years imprisonment. The courtroom erupted. The judge raised his voice. Suspended. The defendant will serve no additional time beyond the 2 years already served in pretrial custody. However, he will be placed on supervised probation for 3 years, during which he must complete 2,000 hours of community service working with legitimate pharmaceutical access programs. He must also pay a fine of 500 million won to be distributed to organizations working on medical access issues. Aaliyah stopped breathing. Suspended sentence. No prison. Probation. He was free. Additionally, the judge said, I am imposing travel restrictions. The defendant may not leave Seoul without permission from his probation officer. He will submit to regular check-ins and surprise inspections. Any violation of these terms will result in immediate imprisonment of the full 5-year sentence. Does the defendant understand these terms? Yes, Your Honor. Ji-sung's voice was steady, but Aaliyah could see his hands shaking. Then this court is adjourned. Mr. Park, you are released from custody immediately following processing. Congratulations on your freedom. Use it wisely. The gavel came down. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then the courtroom exploded with noise, reporters shouting questions, supporters cheering, prosecutors arguing amongst themselves. Aaliyah pushed through the crowd, Yoonhee right behind her. Taiwan cleared a path. They reached Ji-sung just as the guards were removing his monitoring bracelet. Hey, he said when he saw her, and his smile was genuine sunlight after 2 years of darkness. Hey, yourself. She wanted to throw her arms around him, but guards and lawyers and chaos surrounded them. You're free. I'm free. He looked at his mother, surprise still evident. You came. I'm sorry it took so long. Yoonhee's composure cracked. I'm so sorry, Ji-sung, for everything, for not being there when you needed me. For the first time since Aaliyah had known him, Ji-sung looked uncertain. Then he stepped forward and hugged his mother, and Yoonhee sobbed into his shoulder. 2 years of separation and decades of regret pouring out. The lawyers eventually ushered them to a private room for processing. Papers to sign, conditions to review, probation officer contact information. Ji-sung handled it all with methodical focus, but his eyes kept finding Aaliyah across the room. Finally, they were done. The lawyers dispersed, the guards stepped away, and Ji-sung was officially legally free. Tywin drove them home, to the mansion that had been empty of its owner for 2 years. Mrs. Bike had the gate open before they arrived, tears streaming down her face when Ji-sung emerged from the car. "Welcome home, Mr. Park," she said in Korean. Ji-sung hugged her, something Aaliyah had never seen him do. "Thank you for taking care of things, for taking care of her." Mrs. Bayek just nodded, too emotional to speak. Inside, the house felt different, lighter, like it had been holding its breath and could finally exhale. Yoon-hee made excuses about appointments, promising to visit again soon. Taewon disappeared into his security office. Mrs. Black retreated to the kitchen, and suddenly, Aaliyah and Ji-sung were alone in the foyer of his mansion, their mansion, for the first time in 2 years. "So," Ji-sung said. "So," Aaliyah replied. They stared at each other, then simultaneously moved, meeting in the middle, arms around each other, holding on like they were the only solid things in a spinning world. "I can't believe you waited," Ji-sung whispered into her hair. "I can't believe you actually stayed. Where else would I be? Living your life, being happy, finding someone normal. Normal's overrated." She pulled back to look at him. "You need to sit down. You've been standing too long. Your legs are fine. I'm fine. Better than fine. I'm free." He cupped her face. "And I'm home. Finally home." She kissed him then, properly, deeply, with 2 years of forced distance and careful courtroom restraint finally breaking. He kissed her back like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning, his hands tangling in her braids, pulling her closer. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I need to ask you something," he said. "Now? We just got home. You should rest, eat something. Maybe now." He stepped back, then slowly, carefully, lowered himself to one knee. Aaliyah's breath caught. "Ji-sung, what are you—" "I know I promised to wait until everything was resolved. I know this isn't a fancy restaurant or a romantic location, but I've waited 2 years to do this properly, and I can't wait another second." He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. When had he gotten that? And opened it. Inside was a ring. Not the simple band she'd given him 2 years ago. This was a proper engagement ring, sapphire center stone surrounded by diamonds set in white gold. "Aaliyah Rose Miller," Ji-sung said, his voice remarkably steady for a man on one knee with trembling legs. "You've seen me at my absolute worst. You know every dark corner of my soul, every mistake I've made, every reason you should run. And you stayed anyway. You waited when anyone rational would have left. You loved me when I didn't deserve it, and you never once made me feel less than whole, even when I couldn't walk, couldn't protect you, couldn't be the man I wanted to be." Tears streamed down Aaliyah's face. "I can't promise you an easy life. I can't promise we won't face more hardships, but I can promise that I will love you fiercely, honestly, and completely for the rest of my life. I can promise that you will never doubt your worth to me. And I can promise that I will spend every day trying to deserve the gift of your love." He held up the ring. "Will you marry me?" Aaliyah dropped to her knees in front of him, not trusting her voice. She nodded, tears falling freely. "Is that a yes?" he asked, smiling through his own tears. "Yes, yes, you idiot." "Of course yes." She held out her shaking hand. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Then they were kissing again, kneeling together on the marble floor of the foyer, two people who'd survived impossible odds and come out the other side, changed but together. When they finally pulled apart, Ji-sung winced. "I need to stand up, my legs are—" "Giving out because you just spent 5 minutes on your knees after a marathon day." Aaliyah helped him up, guiding him to the nearest chair. "You're ridiculous, you know that? Proposing on one knee when you can barely— I wanted to do it properly. You deserved that. What I deserve is a fiancé who doesn't injure himself being romantic." But she was smiling, looking at the ring on her finger, still not quite believing it was real. Mrs. Beck appeared with tea and food. She'd clearly been waiting for this moment. Tywin emerged to offer congratulations in his gruff way. Even Yoon-hee called, having somehow heard the news already, her voice warm with approval. That night, after everyone had left and the house finally quieted, Aaliyah and Ji-sung lay in his bed, their bed, talking in the darkness. "What happens now?" Aaliyah asked. "With your organization, your business, everything you built? Most of it's gone. Collapsed during the trial. What remains?" He shifted, pulling her closer. "I don't want it anymore. Not the violence, not the danger, not the constant looking over my shoulder. The judge gave me a second chance. I want to use it differently." "Differently how?" "The community service, 2,000 hours working with pharmaceutical access programs. What if that's not just a sentence? What if it's a beginning?" He traced patterns on her arm. "I have contacts, knowledge, resources. What if I use them legitimately? Created a foundation that actually changes the system instead of just working around it. Aaliyah propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. You want to go legitimate? I want to stop running. I want to build something that won't require you to lie to investigators. He met her eyes. I want to be someone our children could be proud of, not someone they have to make excuses for. Our children? Eventually, if you want them. No pressure. She kissed him softly. I want them, and I want you to build that foundation. I'll help. You're supposed to be focused on your own nursing career. I can do both. Besides, who better to run a pharmaceutical access foundation than a nurse who understands the medical side and a reformed smuggler who understands the distribution side? He smiled in the darkness. We match. Broken people fixing broken systems. Exactly. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, planning a future that finally felt possible. The first month of freedom was harder than Ji-sung expected. After 2 years of rigid schedule and controlled environment, having unlimited freedom felt destabilizing. He woke at 6 a.m. out of habit, expecting guards to do morning rounds. He caught himself asking permission before leaving rooms. Small spaces felt safer than open ones. It's normal, Aaliyah assured him during a particularly difficult morning when he'd had a panic attack over choosing what to eat for breakfast. Too many options after years of institutional food. You're readjusting. Give yourself time. I don't want time. I want to be normal again. You were never normal. That's why I love you. The probation conditions were strict but manageable. Weekly check-ins with Officer Kim, a stern woman in her 40s who made it clear she'd watched the entire trial and wasn't impressed. Monthly drug tests, despite Ji-sung never having used drugs. Surprise home inspections that meant keeping the house carefully free of anything questionable. The community service started 2 weeks after his release. The organization assigned to him was MedAccess Korea, a non-profit working on pharmaceutical equity. Their director, Dr. Sarah Chen, was a Korean-American woman in her 50s who'd spent 20 years fighting pharmaceutical price gouging. Mr. Park, she said at their first meeting, her expression skeptical. I'll be honest. When the court assigned you here, I wasn't thrilled. You represent everything wrong with trying to fix systemic problems through illegal means. I understand. However, she continued, you also clearly understand the problem better than most, and you have contacts, knowledge, and resources that could be invaluable if used properly. So here's the deal. You work hard, you follow our ethical guidelines, and you genuinely contribute to legal solutions. I'll write glowing reports to your probation officer. You treat this as just serving time, I'll make those 2,000 hours feel like 20,000. Clear? Crystal clear. Good. You start Monday. Wear comfortable shoes. We're going to field sites. The field sites were eye-opening. Dr. Chen took Ji-sung to hospitals in poor neighborhoods where patients were turned away for inability to pay, to pharmacies where elderly people chose between medication and food, to homes where parents diluted their children's medication to make it last longer, risking ineffective treatment. This is what you were trying to fix, Dr. Chen said at one particularly devastating visit. A mother had been rationing her daughter's insulin, resulting in a medical crisis. But your method just put a Band-Aid on systemic bleeding. We need to change the system itself. How? Ji-sung asked, genuinely curious. The pharmaceutical companies have billions in lobbying money. The government officials are bought and paid for. The system is designed to maintain the status quo. Through legislation, public pressure, coalition building, legal challenges to patent abuses. She looked at him directly. It's slower than smuggling, less dramatic, but it's permanent change instead of temporary relief. Something clicked in Ji-sung's mind. He'd spent years treating symptoms. Dr. Chen was teaching him to cure the disease. He threw himself into the work, attended legislative hearings, helped draft policy proposals, used his old contacts, the legitimate ones, to build coalitions of affected families. Aaliyah joined him, bringing her nursing perspective and her ability to translate complex medical issues for lay audiences. 3 months into his community service, they had their first victory. A bill passed through Seoul's City Council limiting price markups on essential medications. Small, local, not nationally binding, but real change, achieved legally. Dr. Chen called them into her office the day after the vote. You did good work on this, both of you. Real, legitimate legal work. How'd it feel? Slower than I'd like, Ji-sung admitted, but more solid. Like we built something that won't collapse the moment I'm arrested. Exactly? She pulled out a folder. Which brings me to my next question. Your community service requirement is 2,000 hours. At your current pace, you'll finish in 18 months. What happens after? Ji-sung and Aaliyah exchanged glances. I want to start a foundation, Ji-sung said. MedAccess Foundation Korea, focused on pharmaceutical equity, but also medical equipment access, healthcare education in underserved communities, and legal advocacy for patient rights. Funded how? I still have some assets the prosecutors didn't seize. Not much, but enough to start. Plus fundraising, grants, partnerships with legitimate pharmaceutical companies who want to improve their public image. Dr. Chen studied him. You're serious about this? Completely serious. Then I have a proposal. Instead of starting from scratch, why not expand MedAccess Korea? You bring your funding, your contacts, and your time. I provide structure, legal framework, and 20 years of expertise. We build this together. Ji-sung looked at Aaliyah. She nodded. Partners, Ji-sung said, extending his hand. Dr. Chen shook it firmly. Partners, now get back to work. That legislative victory was nice, but we've got 14 more policy targets this year. As they left her office, Aaliyah bumped Ji-sung's shoulder. Look at you. Legitimate businessman, making legal change. Who are you, and what have you done with the crime boss I fell in love with? He's still here, just channeling his rebellious energy into acceptable outlets. I like this version of you. Yeah? Yeah, though I also like the version who threatened hospital directors and orchestrated information warfare against rivals. You contain multitudes. I'm complex. You're a pain in the ass. You're marrying this pain in the ass in 6 months. They'd set the wedding date for exactly 1 year after his release. Enough time to rebuild stability, satisfy probation requirements, and plan properly. Aaliyah wanted something small and intimate. Ji-sung wanted whatever made her happy. They compromised on a medium-sized ceremony. Close friends, family, some of his reformed organization members, her nursing school colleagues who'd flown in from Chicago. But planning a wedding while rebuilding a life proved complicated. 4 months after his release, Ji-sung's past came calling. They were at home, reviewing foundation paperwork, when Taiwan appeared in the doorway of Ji-sung's office. His expression was grim. We have a problem. Daijung is out of prison. Ji-sung went very still. When? Released this morning. Early release for good behavior and cooperation with authorities. The man who'd betrayed Ji-sung, who'd tried to destroy his organization and handed evidence to prosecutors, was free, and probably angry. What's our security status? Ji-sung asked, his voice calm but his hands clenched. I've already doubled the guards, contacted the probation office to inform them of potential threat. But sir, Taiwan hesitated. Daijung still has connections, resources. If he wants revenge, he won't get it. Ji-sung turned to Aaliyah. You're not going anywhere alone. Not to the clinic, not to the foundation, nowhere. Taiwan or another guard accompanies you everywhere. Ji-sung, that's non-negotiable. His eyes were hard, the crime boss she'd first met resurfacing. Daijung knows the fastest way to hurt me is through you. I won't give him that opportunity. The next 2 weeks existed in heightened tension. Guards everywhere, security systems upgraded, every unfamiliar car noted, every unexpected sound investigated. Aaliyah tried to maintain normalcy, but the constant surveillance wore on her. I feel like a prisoner, she complained to Yoon-hee during one of their now regular tea meetings. You're a target, Yoon-hee corrected gently. There's a difference. My son is protecting what he loves. Try not to resent him for it. I don't resent him. I resent the situation. I resent that his past keeps reaching out to threaten our future. That's the price of loving someone with a complicated history. The past never stays buried completely. The confrontation came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Aaliyah was at MedAccess headquarters working on grant proposals when Taewon's phone buzzed. He stepped outside to take the call, and through the glass door, Aaliyah saw his expression change. He rushed back in. We need to leave, now. What's wrong? Daijung just showed up at the mansion. Ji-sung is alone with him. Aaliyah's blood went cold. Take me there, right now. They made it across Seoul in record time, Taiwan driving like the former getaway driver he'd been. When they pulled up to the mansion, 2 unfamiliar black cars were parked in the drive. The front door stood open. Aaliyah ran inside, Taiwan shouting after her to wait. She found them in the living room. Ji-sung in his wheelchair. He'd been having a bad mobility day, legs weak from stress, facing a man who had to be Daijung. Older, scarred, radiating violence. 4 men stood behind Daijung, armed, tense, ready. Aaliyah, leave, Ji-sung said the moment he saw her. His voice was controlled, but fear flashed in his eyes. No. She moved to stand beside him, her hand on his shoulder. Daijung laughed. So this is the famous American nurse, the woman worth destroying an empire for. He spoke in English, heavily accented. I came to see for myself if she's really worth all the trouble you caused me. Say what you came to say and leave, Ji-sung said quietly. You're violating my probation terms by being here. I can have you arrested. I came to propose a deal. Dae-jung pulled out a chair, sat without invitation. You destroyed my Hong Kong operation, cost me millions, got me arrested, ruined my reputation. I spent 2 years in prison because of you. You spent 2 years in prison because you betrayed me first, because you tried to take what wasn't yours. Details. Dae-jung waved dismissively. Here's what matters now. I want compensation. 10 million US dollars. You have 1 week to deliver it, or... He looked at Aaliyah. Accidents happen, especially to foreign nurses walking alone at night. The threat hung in the air, explicit and chilling. Ji-sung's voice went deadly calm. Touch her, and I will forget every legal lesson I've learned. I will hunt you with every remaining resource I have. I will make your death slow and public and a warning to anyone who thinks threatening what's mine is acceptable. You're on probation. You can't even leave Seoul without permission. You have no organization, no power, no teeth anymore. Dae-jung leaned forward. You're a cripple playing at being dangerous. Pay me, or watch her suffer. Something in Aaliyah snapped. Before anyone could react, she stepped forward and slapped Dae-jung across the face, hard. The room froze. Dae-jung touched his reddening cheek, shock giving way to fury. You bitch! You threatened the wrong woman, Aaliyah said, her voice shaking but fierce. I've survived worse than you. I've watched this man orchestrate the destruction of enemies without leaving a hospital bed. I've seen him dismantle organizations with nothing but information and strategy. And you think just because he's in a wheelchair, he's weak? She laughed, and it was slightly unhinged. You're so focused on what he can't do physically that you've forgotten what made him dangerous in the first place. It was never his ability to walk. It was his mind, his connections, his absolute refusal to accept defeat. Dae-jung stood, towering over her. You have no idea who you're talking to. I know exactly who I'm talking to. A man who got outplayed by a paraplegic. A man who spent 2 years in prison while Ji-sung spent 2 years preparing for this exact moment. She looked at Ji-sung. Tell him what you've been planning. Ji-sung's expression was unreadable. Then slowly, he smiled. I had a feeling you'd come for revenge, so I prepared. Over the past 4 months, I've been gathering information about your new operations, your suppliers, your buyers, your routes. I know about the warehouse in Busan, the contacts in Taiwan, the money laundering through the restaurant chain. Dae-jung's confidence wavered. I also know, Ji-sung continued conversationally, about your wife in Hong Kong. The one you told everyone died, the one who's actually been living under a new identity because you beat her so badly she had to disappear. I found her. Had a very interesting conversation about her willingness to testify against you if the right authorities asked the right questions. You're bluffing. Am I? Call her, I'll wait. Ji-sung pulled out his phone, showing a recent call log to a Hong Kong number. We spoke yesterday. Lovely woman. Surprisingly forgiving, all things considered. Though she did mention she kept medical records from all the times you put her in the hospital. Photos, documentation, evidence that could reopen old cases. The blood drained from Dae-jung's face. So here's my counterproposal, Ji-sung said softly. You leave. You go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. You never contact me, never threaten my fiancé, never even think our names again. And in exchange, I don't hand every piece of information I've collected to the prosecutors who would love nothing more than to put you back in prison for 20 years instead of 2. You can't. I already have copies with my lawyer, dated, witnessed, ready to be delivered if anything happens to me or mine. Insurance policy. Ji-sung wheeled forward slightly. We can end this peacefully, Dae-jung, or we can end it the old way and only one of us walks away. Your choice. The silence stretched impossibly long. Finally, Dae-jung stepped back. This isn't over. Yes, Ji-sung said calmly, it is. You just don't know it yet. Dae-jung and his men left. The sound of car engines fading was the sweetest thing Aaliyah had ever heard. The moment they were gone, Ji-sung's composure cracked. He grabbed Aaliyah's hand, pulling her down to eye level. Don't ever do that again. Don't ever put yourself between me and danger. I can't. His voice broke. I can't survive losing you. You won't lose me. We're partners, remember? Partners protect each other. You slapped him. You actually slapped a man who's killed people. He called you a cripple. Nobody gets to do that. Ji-sung laughed shakily. You're insane. We've established that. She kissed him softly. Was all that about his wife true? Every word. I spent 4 months preparing for this exact scenario. Legal warfare instead of physical. Information instead of violence. Dr. Chen would be proud. I'm proud. Aaliyah pulled back to look at him. You didn't kill him. You could have. Probably wanted to, but you found another way. I found your way. The one where we use the system instead of working around it. The one where we're better than we used to be. He pulled her closer. The one where I don't risk my freedom and our future for revenge. That night, after Taewon had confirmed Dae-jung had left Seoul entirely, After the security systems had been rechecked and the guards reassured, Aaliyah and Ji-sung lay in bed, processing. "I need to tell you something," Ji-sung said into the darkness. Aaliyah's stomach tightened. "Okay. When Daijung threatened you, when he talked about accidents happening, there was a moment where I almost reverted, almost called in old favors, almost ordered him eliminated. The old me would have, without hesitation. But you didn't. Because of you. Because the man you agreed to marry isn't a killer anymore. He's someone trying to be better. And that person finds legal solutions, even when illegal ones would be easier." Aaliyah turned to face him. "You're not defined by one moment of temptation. You're defined by what you actually chose. And you chose the legal path, the harder path. That's growth, Ji-sung. I'm scared I'll fail. That one day the past will pull too hard and I'll slip back into old patterns. Then I'll be there to pull you back. That's what partners do." He kissed her forehead. 6 weeks until the wedding. Think you'll still want to marry me by then?" "Absolutely. Though I might request fewer death threats at our reception. I'll see what I can do." They fell asleep holding each other. The threat passed, the future still uncertain, but theirs to build together. The 6 weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of final preparations and small victories. Daijung kept his distance, eventually leaving Korea entirely according to Taiwan's intelligence network. The foundation officially incorporated, with Ji-sung and Dr. Chen as co-directors and Aaliyah as head of medical outreach. Ji-sung's probation officer gave grudgingly positive reports about his community service, and slowly, carefully, they built a life that looked almost normal. Almost. Because normal people didn't have armed security at their engagement party. Normal couples didn't have their wedding venue swept for threats. Normal brides didn't have to brief their guests on what not to mention to probation officers who'd be attending. But they weren't normal. Never had been. The wedding was set for a Saturday in April, exactly 1 year after Ji-sung's release. They'd chosen a small luxury hotel in Seoul with beautiful gardens and enough security infrastructure to satisfy Taiwan's concerns. 60 guests, intimate by Korean standards, enormous by Aaliyah's preferences. The week before the wedding, Aaliyah's mother arrived from Chicago. Denise Miller was everything Aaliyah had warned Ji-sung about: opinionated, protective, deeply religious, and absolutely terrified of her daughter marrying a convicted criminal in a foreign country. "Baby," she said within 5 minutes of arriving at the mansion, "it's not too late to call this off. We can go home, find you a nice job in Chicago, find you a nice man who doesn't have armed guards. Mom, I love him, and he's a good man. He went to prison. He got a suspended sentence for helping people access medication they couldn't afford. Context matters." Denise looked around the massive mansion with obvious discomfort. "This whole situation is too much, too complicated, too dangerous. You deserve simple, Aaliyah. You deserve safe." Ji-sung chose that moment to enter, using his wheelchair for the longer indoor distances. He'd dressed carefully for this meeting, approachable, non-threatening, the opposite of a crime boss. "Mrs. Miller," he said, his English perfect and his smile genuine. "Thank you for coming. It means everything to Aaliyah." Denise studied him with the critical eye of a mother whose only daughter was making questionable life choices. "Mr. Park?" "Ji-sung, please." "Mr. Park," she repeated firmly. "I need to ask you something directly, and I want an honest answer." "Of course. Why my daughter? You could have anyone. Why choose an American nurse with student loans and a complicated family and no connections to your world?" Ji-sung didn't hesitate. "Because she saw all of me. The worst parts, the broken parts, the parts I wanted to hide, and stayed anyway. Because she's stronger than anyone I've ever met. Because she makes me want to be better than I was. And because I love her more than I've ever loved anything in my life." The honesty of it seemed to catch Denise off guard. She looked at Aaliyah, then back at Ji-sung. "If you hurt her, I know, you'll make me regret it. Taewon gave me the same speech, and he's significantly more intimidating than you. No offense." Despite herself, Denise smiled slightly. "I like your security man. Everyone does. He's very likable once you get past the death stares and weapons." Over the next few days, Denise slowly warmed to Ji-sung. She watched how he treated Aaliyah, with respect and tenderness and absolute devotion. She saw how the staff loved him, how Dr. Chen spoke of his foundation work with genuine admiration, how his mother treated him with the kind of fierce protectiveness that only comes from deep love. By Thursday, Denise pulled Aaliyah aside. "I still think this is insane," she said, "but I can see you love him, really love him, and he clearly worships the ground you walk on. So I'm going to support this, even though every maternal instinct says to kidnap you and run back to Chicago. I appreciate the restraint. But Aaliyah, seriously, if this goes bad, if he breaks your heart or puts you in danger, then I'll handle it. Like I've handled everything else in my life. I'm not a victim, Mom. I'm a partner, an equal, and we're building something real together. Denise hugged her tightly. You grew up so much, and I missed it. I'm sorry I wasn't there when things fell apart with Marcus, when you needed to leave Chicago. You're here now. That's what matters. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful. Aaliyah woke early in the hotel suite she was sharing with her mother and her maid of honor, a nursing school friend named Tasha, who'd flown in from Chicago specifically for this. Girl, Tasha said while doing Aaliyah's makeup, when you said you were marrying a former crime boss in Seoul, I thought you'd lost your mind. But after meeting him, I get it. That man looks at you like you hung the moon. He's been through a lot, we both have. And now you're building something new together. That's beautiful. Crazy, but beautiful. The dress was simple. Ivory silk, fitted bodice, flowing skirt. Her braids were styled up with fresh flowers woven through. Minimal jewelry except for the engagement ring and a necklace Ji-sung had given her, a sapphire on a delicate chain. When she was ready, Denise cried, "You're so beautiful, baby. Your father would have loved to see this." Aaliyah's eyes misted. Her father had died when she was 12. She'd always imagined him walking her down the aisle. Instead, Taewon had volunteered, the closest thing to family Ji-sung had besides his mother, and by extension, the closest thing Aaliyah had in Korea. The ceremony was in the hotel garden. White chairs arranged in neat rows, an arch covered in flowers at the front, string quartet playing softly. 60 people who'd all been thoroughly vetted by security stood when Aaliyah appeared, and at the front, actually standing, legs trembling but upright, refusing the wheelchair for this moment, was Ji-sung. He wore a classic black tuxedo, his hair styled back, the scar through his eyebrow visible and striking. His eyes found hers across the garden, and his smile was pure joy. Taewon walked her down the aisle, his massive presence somehow gentle. When they reached the front, he placed Aaliyah's hand in Ji-sung's and whispered something in Korean that made Ji-sung laugh through tears. The ceremony was a blend of Korean and American traditions. The officiant spoke in both languages. They bowed to each other and to their parents, Ji-sung's mother sitting in the front row, crying openly. They exchanged rings, traditional vows mixed with personal promises. When Ji-sung spoke his vows, his voice was steady but emotional. Aaliyah, 2.5 years ago, you walked into my hospital room running from danger, and I thought you were an opportunity, a useful complication. I had no idea you were salvation. He squeezed her hands. You've seen me at my worst, paralyzed, imprisoned, drowning in my own darkness, and you didn't try to save me. You stood beside me and demanded I save myself. You refused to let me use my circumstances as an excuse for not being better. He paused, composing himself. I can't promise you a simple life. I can't promise that my past won't occasionally resurface, but I can promise that I will love you fiercely and honestly for the rest of my life. I can promise that I will work every day to be the man you deserve. And I can promise that you will never face anything alone. We're partners, always. Aaliyah's tears flowed freely as she spoke her own vows. Ji-sung, when I came to Seoul, I was running from failure, from a life that had imploded, from people who'd hurt me, from my own sense of inadequacy. I thought a new country would mean a fresh start. I had no idea it would mean you. She smiled through tears. You challenged me in ways I didn't expect. You forced me to confront my own prejudices about morality, about justice, about what it means to do the right thing in an imperfect world. You taught me that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about breaking and choosing to rebuild anyway. You showed me what real partnership looks like. Not one person saving the other, but two people choosing each other's battles as their own. She took a shaky breath. I promise to love you in all your complexity, to call you out when you're wrong and celebrate you when you're right, to stand beside you in courtrooms and hospitals and foundation meetings and every ordinary moment in between, to never let you forget that you're worthy of love exactly as you are. We're partners, always. By the power vested in me, the officiant said, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Ji-sung pulled Aaliyah close, kissing her deeply while their guests erupted in applause. When they broke apart, both laughing and crying, he whispered, I love you, Mrs. Park. I love you too, though I'm keeping my name professionally. I'd expect nothing less. The reception was beautiful chaos. Korean and American food blending on the buffet. The string quartet giving way to a DJ who somehow made K-pop and R&B work together. Speeches from Taiwan, surprisingly emotional, from Dr. Chen, praising their foundation work. From Denise, warning Ji-sung that she'd hunt him down if he broke her daughter's heart. Yoon-hee's speech was the one that broke everyone. My son has lived many lives, she said in English, her accent thick but understandable. He has been a boy who lost his father too young. A young man who built an empire on determination and rage. A patient who fought for his life and his mobility. A prisoner who faced his consequences with dignity. And now, finally, a husband who has found his home in another person. She looked at Aaliyah directly. When I failed my son, when I let fear drive me away when he needed me most, I thought I had lost him forever. But you, Aaliyah, you brought him back, not to who he was, but to who he was meant to become. You gave him permission to change, to heal, to build something new. For that, I will be grateful for the rest of my life. She raised her glass. To Aaliyah and Ji-sung, may your love be as strong as the obstacles you've overcome. May your partnership be as enduring as your commitment to each other. And may you always remember that real strength isn't about never falling. It's about who stands beside you when you do. Everyone drank. Later, during their first dance, Ji-sung leaned heavily on Aaliyah, his legs giving out after standing for so long. I'm sorry, he murmured. I wanted to dance with you properly, but you're dancing with me. That's all that matters. She held him close, swaying gently. Besides, I love you in the wheelchair too. Want to sit? Not yet. Just a little longer. They swayed together, both knowing he was pushing past his limits, but neither wanting the moment to end. When his legs finally buckled, Taewon appeared with the wheelchair like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. Ji-sung transferred with practiced ease, then pulled Aaliyah onto his lap, continuing the dance that way. Unconventional and perfect. The party lasted until midnight. Then, Aaliyah and Ji-sung retreated to the honeymoon suite, exhausted and happy. We're married, Aaliyah said, looking at her wedding ring. We're married, Ji-sung confirmed. How does it feel? Right. Crazy, complicated, probably inadvisable. But right. Good. Because I'm not giving you back. They fell asleep, still in their wedding clothes, too tired for anything except holding each other. The next morning, they flew to Jeju Island for a week-long honeymoon. 7 days of beaches and hiking, and absolutely no talk of foundations or probation or past threats. Just two people in love, finally getting to be simple. On their last night in Jeju, they sat on their private balcony watching the sunset. What do you think happens next? Aaliyah asked. After the honeymoon, after we go back to real life, we keep building. The foundation, our marriage, a future that looks nothing like either of our pasts. He pulled her close. We prove that people can change, that complicated people can find simple happiness. That love can survive anything if both people are committed. That's very optimistic for you. I'm married to an optimist. It's rubbing off. She kissed him as the sun set over the ocean, both of them knowing that challenges still waited back in Seoul, but also knowing they'd face them together. The medical conference center in downtown Seoul was packed. Over 300 people had come to hear about the MedAccess Foundation's 2-year results, 40 legislative victories, thousands of people connected to affordable medication, and a model for pharmaceutical equity that was being replicated in 3 other countries. Backstage, Aaliyah adjusted Ji-sung's tie for the 3rd time. You're nervous, she observed. I'm about to present in front of government officials who prosecuted me 3 years ago. Nervous is understated. You've presented to bigger crowds. Not while 7 months pregnant. Aaliyah laughed, placing his hand on her swollen belly. She's calm today. I think she approves of Daddy's presentation. They'd found out about the pregnancy 4 months ago. A surprise that had sent Ji-sung into simultaneous panic and joy. After years of medical complications and mobility issues, neither had been sure children were possible. But apparently, life had other plans. 5 minutes, a stagehand called. Ji-sung stood from his wheelchair, gripping his walker. He'd graduated from the wheelchair for most activities, though he still used it for long distances or difficult days. Today, he wanted to stand for the presentation, a symbolic gesture about standing up for change. Dr. Chen appeared, looking excited. The Minister of Health just arrived. She specifically asked to speak with you both after the presentation. Good or bad? Aaliyah asked. Very good. I think she wants to discuss expanding our model nationwide. Ji-sung and Aaliyah exchanged glances. Nationwide expansion meant real, systemic change. Everything they'd been working toward. Showtime, Dr. Chen said. Ji-sung walked onto the stage to applause, Aaliyah beside him, and began the presentation they'd rehearsed dozens of times. But halfway through, he went off script. 3 years ago, he said, I stood in a courtroom as a convicted criminal. I'd lost almost everything. My freedom, my organization, my sense of purpose. The judge gave me a suspended sentence and 2,000 hours of community service, and I thought I was being punished. He paused, looking at the audience. I didn't realize I was being given a gift. The chance to rebuild, the opportunity to use my knowledge and resources for something legal and lasting, the freedom to become someone I could be proud of. His eyes found Aaliyah in the front row. I didn't do this alone. My wife, my partner in every sense, taught me that change is possible if you're willing to do the work, that systems can shift if enough people push together in the same direction, that complicated pasts don't have to define simple futures. He gestured to the presentation screen behind him, showing statistics on lives impacted, costs reduced, policies changed. This is what legal change looks like. It's slower than I wanted, less dramatic than my previous methods, but it's real, it's permanent, and it's just the beginning. The applause was thunderous. After the presentation, the Minister of Health did indeed request a private meeting. She was a sharp woman in her 50s who'd been critical of Ji-sung during his trial. "Mr. Park," she said, shaking his hand, "I'll admit I didn't expect to be impressed by you. But this work, what you and Dr. Chen and Mrs. Park have built, it's exactly what this country needs. Thank you, Minister. I want to propose a partnership. The government will fund expansion of your model to 10 additional cities. In exchange, you'll help us draft national pharmaceutical equity legislation. We'll use your foundation as a consultant, pay you properly, and give you a seat at the policy table." Ji-sung looked at Aaliyah, who nodded enthusiastically. "We'd be honored," he said. "Excellent. My office will send the contract details next week." She paused. "And Mr. Park, I want to apologize. During your trial, I made statements to the press calling your actions reckless and dangerous. I wasn't wrong about the illegality, but I failed to acknowledge the systemic failures that drove you to those methods. You exposed problems we should have been solving all along." Ji-sung was quiet for a moment. "Your criticism wasn't unfair, Minister. I broke the law, but I appreciate the acknowledgement that the law itself needed changing." After the minister left, Dr. Chen pulled them both into a tight hug. "Do you understand what this means? National policy changes, government funding, legitimate pathways to the kind of impact you used to achieve through smuggling, but legal and sustainable." "I understand," Ji-sung said, and his smile was genuine. "It means we won." That evening, back at the mansion, Aaliyah and Ji-sung sat in the nursery they'd been preparing. Soft yellow walls, a crib that Ji-sung had insisted on assembling himself despite his mobility limitations, shelves already filled with books in Korean and English. "Our daughter's going to grow up in a very different world than either of us did," Aaliyah said, resting her hand on her belly. "Better, hopefully, certainly stranger." Ji-sung placed his hand over hers, feeling the baby kick. "She'll have a father who used to run a criminal organization and a mother who once lived in a supply closet. That's quite an origin story. We'll tell her the sanitized version until she's old enough for the truth. And when she asks why Daddy walks differently than other dads, we'll tell her that sometimes people's bodies work differently, and that's okay. That strength comes in many forms, that her father rebuilt himself from nothing and became someone who changes systems instead of breaking them." Ji-sung pulled Aaliyah close, careful of her pregnant belly. "I never thought I'd have this, a family, a legal career, a future that doesn't involve looking over my shoulder constantly. Do you miss it? The old life, the power, the—" "No," he said it with certainty. "I miss the efficiency sometimes. The ability to solve problems with a phone call instead of 18 months of legislative work. But the cost was too high, living in constant danger, hurting people even when I thought I was helping them, becoming someone I was ashamed of." He kissed her forehead. "This is better. Slower, harder, but better." A knock on the nursery door. Taewon entered, looking uncomfortable in the domestic space but holding a wrapped gift. "For the baby," he said gruffly. "From the old crew, the ones who stayed loyal." Ji-sung unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a handmade mobile, paper cranes in rainbow colors, each one folded by a different member of his former organization. A card listed the names, former guards, drivers, low-level operatives who'd found legitimate work after the organization collapsed. "They wanted her to know," Taewon said, "that they're grateful, that the boss gave them a way out before things got worse, that they're rooting for the family." Ji-sung's eyes misted. "Thank you. Tell them thank you." After Taewon left, Aaliyah hung the mobile over the crib, watching the paper cranes spin slowly in the air-conditioning breeze. "Your past keeps showing up," she observed. "But it's gentler now, less threatening. Most of them just wanted a path forward. I gave them that, even if it meant my own empire collapsed. Turns out loyalty runs both ways." 3 weeks later, Aaliyah went into labor at 2 a.m. Ji-sung woke to her gripping his arm, breathing hard. "It's time. Time for— Oh. He scrambled for his wheelchair, his legs not cooperating at this hour. "Hospital bag? Where's the hospital bag?" "Already in the car. Taewon's been ready for days." Sure enough, Taewon appeared within minutes, having monitored the security cameras. The drive to the hospital was surreal. Aaliyah timing contractions, Ji-sung holding her hand and trying not to panic. Taewon driving with the same calm efficiency he'd once used for getaway operations. At the hospital, they were ushered into a private room. The irony wasn't lost on Ji-sung. This was the same hospital where he'd recovered from the shooting 3.5 years ago, where he'd first truly seen Aaliyah, not as an employee, but as someone extraordinary. Full circle, he murmured. What? Aaliyah asked between contractions. Nothing. Just thinking about how we started. Labor lasted 14 hours. Ji-sung stayed by Aaliyah's side the entire time, holding her hand, encouraging her, occasionally getting yelled at when the contractions intensified. Nurses came and went, respectful of their privacy, but ensuring everything progressed normally. Denise arrived from Chicago, having flown over when they called to say labor had started. Yoonhee came from her home in Busan. They waited together in the family room, two mothers from different worlds united by love for their children. Finally, at 4:17 p.m., Park Ji-ah was born. 6 pounds, 3 ounces, full head of black hair, her mother's nose and her father's eyes. She came into the world crying indignantly, and the sound was the most beautiful thing Ji-sung had ever heard. When the nurse placed her in his arms, Ji-sung broke down completely. This tiny person, this perfect combination of him and Aaliyah, this proof that life could be built from ruins. She was everything. She's perfect, he whispered. Aaliyah, she's perfect. Aaliyah, exhausted but glowing, smiled from the bed. Of course she is. She's ours. They named her Ji-ah, wisdom and elegance, a name that honored Ji-sung's Korean heritage while being easy for Aaliyah's American family to pronounce, a name that meant a new beginning. Over the next few days, visitors came in controlled waves. Dr. Chen brought flowers and a donation to Ji-ah's college fund. Taewon showed up with the largest stuffed animal anyone had ever seen, a bear nearly as tall as him. The reformed crew members sent gifts and cards. Even Ji-sung's probation officer stopped by with congratulations. You've come a long way, Mr. Park, Officer Kim said, looking at Ji-sung holding his daughter. When I first took your case, I'll admit I thought you'd violate within 6 months. But you proved me wrong. You actually changed. I had good motivation. Ji-sung looked at Aaliyah and Ji-ah, and good people holding me accountable. On their last day in the hospital before going home, Ji-sung sat in the chair beside Aaliyah's bed, Ji-ah sleeping in his arms. Aaliyah was dozing, recovering from the birth. The room was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors and Ji-ah's tiny snores. He thought about the past 3.5 years, the shooting that had paralyzed him, meeting Aaliyah in the chaos of Dae-jung's attack, the slow burn of falling in love while his body healed and his empire crumbled, the trial, the verdict, the rebuilding, every moment of pain, every setback, every time he'd wanted to give up. It had all led here, to this quiet hospital room, to this woman who'd chosen him at his worst, to this baby who represented everything good they could build together. What are you thinking about? Aaliyah asked softly, not quite asleep. Everything. How we got here. How impossible this seemed 3 years ago. Nothing's impossible if you're stubborn enough. Is that the secret? One of them. She reached for his hand. The other is finding someone equally stubborn to be stubborn with. Ji-ah stirred, making small noises. Ji-sung adjusted her position, marveling at how small she was, how fragile, how completely she'd stolen his heart in 3 days. I'm going to be a good father, he said quietly. Not perfect. Probably overprotective given my history, but good, present, the kind of father who shows up. I know you will. And when she's old enough to ask questions about my past, we'll tell her the truth. Age-appropriate versions, but the truth, that people can make mistakes and still be good, that redemption is real, that her father used to be lost and found his way home. Through you, through us, we saved each other, Ji-sung. That's the real story. 6 months later, the national pharmaceutical equity legislation passed. It wasn't perfect. Compromises had been necessary. Lobbying groups had watered down some provisions, but it was real change. Legal protections for patients, price caps on essential medications, expanded access programs, systems to prevent the kind of price gouging that had driven Ji-sung to smuggling in the first place. The signing ceremony was held at the Blue House. The president invited Ji-sung, Dr. Chen, and Aaliyah to attend. They brought 6-month-old Ji-ah, who slept through the entire event in her carrier, oblivious to the historic moment. This legislation, the president said during her speech, represents what's possible when people from different backgrounds work together toward common good. It was championed by healthcare workers, supported by reformed advocates, and pushed forward by citizens who demanded better. It proves that change, while slow, is achievable when we commit to it. She looked directly at Ji-sung. Mr. Park's journey from convicted criminal to respected advocate demonstrates our capacity for growth. His foundation's work provided the blueprint for these reforms. While we cannot condone his past methods, we can appreciate how he channeled his understanding of systemic failures into legal solutions. This is rehabilitation in its truest form. After the ceremony, a reporter approached them. Mr. Park, how does it feel to see your vision become law? Ji-sung thought carefully before answering. Surreal. 3 years ago, I was in a courtroom facing 5 years in prison. Today, I'm watching the government implement solutions to problems I used to solve illegally. It's proof that the system can work if you're patient enough and work within it instead of around it. Do you regret your past actions? I regret the methods. I regret putting people at risk, including myself. But I don't regret trying to help. I just wish I'd found the legal path sooner. What advice would you give to others who see injustice and want to act? Work within the system first. It's slower, more frustrating, requires more compromise. But the changes you create are sustainable, and you don't end up in a courtroom defending your choices. He smiled slightly. Also, find good partners? I couldn't have done any of this without my wife, Dr. Chen, and the team at MedAccess Foundation. That evening, at home, they celebrated quietly. Mrs. Bayek had prepared a feast. Yoon-hee came over with Denise, who was visiting for 2 weeks. Taiwan joined them, increasingly comfortable in this domestic setting. Dr. Chen brought her husband, a quiet literature professor who got along surprisingly well with Taiwan. They toasted with sparkling cider, Aaliyah still nursing, Ji-sung having given up alcohol during his rehabilitation. To change, Dr. Chen offered. To partnership, Aaliyah added. To family, Yoon-hee said, looking at her son with pride. To second chances, Ji-sung finished. They drank, and it felt like an ending and a beginning simultaneously. Later, after everyone had left and Jia was asleep in her crib, Aaliyah and Ji-sung sat in their bedroom. He was in his wheelchair. It had been a long day, and she was curled up beside him, her head on his shoulder. Can I tell you something? Ji-sung asked. Always. I used to dream about power, control, being untouchable, building something so strong that nothing could hurt me. He played with her fingers. Now I dream about Jia's first birthday, about teaching her to walk, about growing old with you and watching her grow up. Simple dreams, happy dreams. Those are better dreams. Much better. He kissed her temple. Thank you for changing my dreams. Thank you for being brave enough to change. They sat in comfortable silence. Two people who'd found each other in chaos and built something beautiful from the wreckage. Outside, Seoul glittered with lights. Inside, their daughter slept peacefully, unaware of the complicated history that had led to her existence. And in that moment, everything was exactly as it should be. The MedAccess Foundation headquarters had moved to a larger building. What had started as Dr. Chen's small nonprofit was now a major organization with 80 employees, satellite offices in 4 cities, and international recognition. Ji-sung's office was on the 3rd floor, with windows overlooking Seoul. Photos covered his desk, his wedding day, Jia as a newborn, family vacations, foundation milestones. His wheelchair sat in the corner. He still needed it for difficult days, though he could walk moderate distances with his cane now. A knock on the door. Daddy? Jia peeked in. 5 years old and precocious, she had Aaliyah's confidence and Ji-sung's intensity, a combination that both delighted and terrified her parents. Come in, sweetheart, where's Mommy? Talking to Dr. Chen about boring stuff. Jia climbed into his lap, a routine that required Ji-sung to brace carefully. Can we go to the park? After work. I have one more meeting. You always have meetings. That's what happens when you try to change the world. Lots of meetings. She considered this seriously. When I grow up, I want to change the world too, but with fewer meetings. Ji-sung laughed. Good luck with that. Aaliyah appeared in the doorway, her nursing scrubs replaced by professional attire. She'd become the Foundation's Director of Medical Programs, coordinating with hospitals and clinics across the country. There you are. Come on, Jia. Daddy needs to finish his presentation for the healthcare summit next week. But we're going to the park after. Yes, after. Let Daddy work. After they left, Ji-sung pulled out his notes for the summit presentation. The topic: From Criminal Enterprise to Legal Advocacy, a case study in systemic change. 5 years ago, he never could have imagined giving such a presentation. Now, it was just another part of his life. His phone buzzed. A message from Taiwan. Daijung died. Heart attack. Thought you should know. Ji-sung stared at the message for a long moment. His old enemy, the man who'd tried to destroy him, dead. He waited for satisfaction, for vindication, for something. Instead, he felt only a distant sadness for a life wasted on violence and revenge. He typed back, Thanks for telling me. Make sure there are no loose ends that could affect the family. Already handled. His organization dissolved years ago. We're clear. Another ghost laid to rest. Another piece of his past that could finally stay buried. That evening at the park, Ji-sung pushed Jia on the swing while Aaliyah sat on a nearby bench reviewing grant proposals. Other families played around them, normal people living normal lives. From the outside, they looked like just another family. Nobody would guess the history, the complications, the journey it had taken to get here. "Higher, Daddy! Higher!" Ji-sung pushed harder, his daughter's laughter ringing out across the playground. His legs ached, they always did after long days, but he didn't care. This moment, this simple joy, was worth every struggle. Later, walking home as the sun set, Jia held both their hands, swinging between them. "Mommy, Daddy, I love you," she announced with the certainty of a 5-year-old who'd never known anything but security and love. "We love you too, sweetheart," Aaliyah replied. Ji-sung looked at his wife over their daughter's head. 7 years since that chaotic first meeting, 6 years of marriage, 5 years of legitimate work, and finally, he understood what he'd been searching for all along. Not power, not control, not invincibility, just this. Just family, just love. Just the simple, extraordinary gift of building a life with someone who chose him, flaws and all, and never stopped choosing him. "What are you thinking about?" Aaliyah asked, reading his expression. "That I'm the luckiest man alive." "Damn right you are." They walked home together as Seoul's lights began to glow in the gathering darkness. 3 people who'd become a family against all odds, proof that redemption was real and love could survive anything. And in that moment, Park Ji-sung, former crime boss, convicted criminal, reformed advocate, husband, father, was finally completely home. The end.